Hi everyone, welcome to the Movieception Show. My name is Fariba, and today I wanted to do my movie review on M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin, which is his latest film that came out last weekend. So yeah, when we talk about M. Night Shyamalan's films, we all know that this is a guy who is always about doing thrillers, and kind of his signature move is really doing the plot twist. And when we look at M. Night Shyamalan's filmography, he's had some hits and he's had some misses, right? Some of his hits, of course, include films like Signs, The Sixth Sense. You can even add in Split there. He's had some really good hits that, managed to really capture the surprise factor because of his, signature plot twist. But of course, he's also had some misses, right? Some really hard-hitting misses, such as The Happening, The Last Airbender. You can even add Glass in that instance, because I wasn't a big fan of Glass. I think it still did well at the box office, but the movie itself was not, up to par with what I would expect from Shyamalan's thriller films, right? And it didn't even feel like a thriller. It was kind of more of a spoofer film just from the way it was presented. So yeah, where does Knock at the Cabin land in terms of, whether it's a hit or a miss? And I would say it would lean more so towards like the average bit. Like, it is a much better film in terms of Shyamalan's films. It is not as, convoluted as The Happening. It is not as, jombly as The Last Airbender. I think that when we look at a movie like Knock at the Cabin, right, we're watching a film that is bringing in things about the apocalypse, bringing in biblical aspects. It is adapted based on the book that I can't really recall right now. It's a really long title. It's like Cabin at the Woods or something like that. But that is what it's based on, right? And it's not the first time that, Shyamalan has adapted a film. We've looked at films like The Last Airbender, where it's an adapted film that did not reach its potential. And then now it's like, okay, where does Knock at the Cabin land in terms of that? And I think that in terms of Knock at the Cabin, in general, I think the story is very interesting. When you have a story about, a couple and their kid who are, living in a cabin, only to see that they're now the ones who have to decide on whether or not they will save the universe, or will they decide to let it, perish and let themselves be the ones to live through all of it, but then see the destruction that does remain and live with that, right? And I think that when we are looking to this film, right, it does have its biblical aspects. It has the four horsemen sort of situation. It has the fact that, we have a couple who are now dealing with this, and now they had to decide what they're going to do with the fate of the world. And I think that's a really interesting, premise that is presented to us, which is Knock at the Cabin. And I think that when you are looking at this film, like, the first thing that comes to mind is the casting, right? You have Jonathan Groff, you have Dave Bautista, you have Rupert Grint, you have all these amazing cast members just put into this film, and you can really get the sense of tension in the room just from the fact that, it is kind of this apocalyptic sort of situation, Judgment Day, that we're dealing with in this film. And the matter of question is, how will the story itself be executed? Like, will it have the signature plot twist? How will it present itself? Will it follow the books, considering that this is adapted from the novel, right? And anybody who has read the books are probably familiar with the story is of itself, right? And when we look into films like Shyamalan's films, most of the time when we do get its ending, they are in some ways shocking. They can be pretty dark at times, and sometimes they're not. But the plot twist is obviously the big thing about Shyamalan's films. And so in terms of just the whole overall aspect of this film, I think for the most part, I was pretty intrigued by what was being presented as the story. I think, again, the big part about it is the performances from the cast, especially from Dave Bautista, because let's just talk about Dave Bautista, right? We've been seeing this whole trend of wrestlers turning actors. We've seen how Dwayne Johnson has really changed the whole aspect of that, and how he's managed to become one of the most expensive and most earned actors out there, especially one who has come from wrestler turned actor sort of scenario. We've seen John Cena kind of have his moment as well as becoming Peacemaker, and the big hit that he had last year in his own titular show, Peacemaker, on HBO Max. And now there's this whole different scenario with Dave Bautista, right? I think that he is someone who we kind of regard in a much better light when we look at this trend of wrestler turned actors, right? Because when we look at to this, right, a lot of times wrestler turned actors are not necessarily the best performing actors. Let's talk about Ronda Rousey, even Dwayne Johnson, right? Like, even though he is the most paid actor out there, his films are not the most, full ranged films. I mean, he's usually in a typical, typecast situation where he is playing a very body built, action hero of some sort, somehow maybe in a jungle situation. And that's typically what it is. He's usually in a jungle situation, and that's what his, characters typically end up being, right? They're not really the most versatile performances that we would see from Dwayne Johnson, yet he is one of the most paid actors. Then we have John Cena, where, yeah, he's not the most dramatic actor, but he does nail the whole comedic aspect of it, right? Something that we probably were a bit surprised about when he did, take on the role as Peacemaker. And even though he might not be the most versatile actor out there, especially in the drama category, he's a very hilarious actor. He knows how to nail the comedic timing of things, and we saw that being displayed in Peacemaker. Now, here is Dave Bautista, right? I think Dave Bautista on his own level has really shown that he takes the whole acting, situation seriously. He actually wants to be a serious actor. He wants to be treated as a serious actor, and we've seen that time and time again in the last few years that he's been acting, that he's become the wrestler turned actor, right? And I think for the last month or so, everyone has been talking about Dave Bautista, how he seems to be sort of different from all the other wrestlers turned actors out there. Like, unlike the other ones, he seems to be the one who really shows this interest of this craft, trying to actually, challenge himself as an actor, trying to show that he can be a versatile actor. And we saw that being presented. We got that hint of that in Blade Runner 2049. I think after his performance there, we really start to see that, okay, this guy is taking acting seriously. And we see from 2049 how much emotionality he puts in the character, even though he was only in the film for 4 minutes, and yet he puts such a huge impact into what happens. And I think that really changed the mentality that, okay, this is Dave Bautista. He isn't just any wrestler turned actor. He isn't just, Drax, who, is only for comic relief, because I think that that's all, a lot of us remember him for. And he's even done a couple of comedy films like My Spy, Stuber, and all that sort of stuff. But he has demonstrated the fact that he is a very versatile actor. He is able to show the more dramatic abilities as an actor in the way that we saw in Blade Runner 2049. In some cases in Dune, although, again, he was a bit more in a different, sort of physique. So it's kind of hard to see him there. But he has managed to really display that. And now here he is in Knock at the Cabin, where we actually see him having a much bigger spotlight, having a much bigger screen time, as not just sort of wrestler turned actor, someone who's trying to be there for comic relief. This is a guy who really wants to show the fact that he is a dramatic actor. He can show it. And in this film, just the fact that Dave Bautista has been able to inlay such a dramatic performance in this film, I think that really is what surprised me, but in the same way really impressed me, because he was pretty incredible in this film. He's managed to show just this range of his that, yeah, he may not be the most, professional actor. He might not have, the training for it. But in this film, he's managed to just show that amount of emotionality, the drama, just giving this range that his character is going through. Because, yeah, he might be one of the four horsemen, and he appears to be the leader of it, but he's not taking things very lightly. Like, for him, this is the last thing he ever wants to deal with. And yet, for him, as a character, the reason why he has to do it is to make sure that people who he does care about do survive the apocalypse, that they are trying to convince this whole family to make their decision to choose, or otherwise the world is at stake, the world's going to be destroyed, yada, 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 right? And I think that we really get this incredible performance from Dave Bautista. I think that he is basically the shining light of this film that I totally was surprised about. I think that when we are looking at performances, considering that he was even in the presence of someone like Jonathan Groff, who has, this training in Broadway, it was Dave Bautista who really shown that he really took the spotlight in this film. And even then, he's technically considered a supporting character, and yet he puts so much heart into this film, into this craft, that he wants to really showcase his acting abilities. And I think he really has shown it. He's really proven that he is capable of doing something like one of the four horsemen in this film, like Knock at the Cabin. And I think he does such a phenomenal job. And that's one thing I wanted to highlight, is that the performances in this film are incredible, especially from someone like Dave Bautista, who's really, really puts his heart out there. And it makes a lot more sense why we all keep saying that, Dave Bautista, he is a guy, and if we were going to be talking about who is the best actor out of the return actor, sort of category, it's going to be Batista. He has really shown it. He can be a funny actor, he can be a dramatic actor, he can do in between. He's displayed that, he's shown that. I think that that's something that's worth complimenting him about. And that doesn't take away the fact that the rest of the cast, of course, Jonathan Groff, I mean, let's be honest, he is always amazing as is. I mean, if there was anything else I love about this film is that we are seeing Jonathan Groff. I enjoy this guy. He has, I mean, we all know him from his time with, doing Broadway, and of course his voice as Kristoff in, Frozen. But of course, for someone like me who has, watched his work, I enjoyed him in a show like Mindhunter, which I feel like is one of the most underrated Netflix shows out there. And yet he really puts his heart out there in that film. I mean, not film, but that series. And even in this film, he does such a great job as playing, Eric in this film, where he is someone who is showing off as someone who is trying to be a bit more open-minded about things, who does realize the stakes of everything, but also trying to make sure that he is protecting his family at all costs. And I think that everybody in this film does such an amazing job of really putting out the performance out there, the emotionality, the drama, the high stakes, knowing that this is a really, really hard situation that's happening, and now they have to help and decide whether or not they want this to happen, what not to happen. And I feel like this is a film that really, really puts up the performance, the high caliber performance in this film, whether it be the supporting cast, the leading cast, even from the kid who plays Win, does such a phenomenal job of just really putting out there just the stakes of it all. And I mean, this goes back to really just Shyamalan, right? Like, none of this would happen if it wasn't for the direction of it. And I think that this is one thing that I would compliment for in terms of how this film really does well, and that is Shyamalan, right? He's able to really put in the direction of it. He's able to control just the rhythm, the performance of everything that's happening in this film. And if it wasn't for the direction, we wouldn't have such a beautiful thing that's coming out of this cast, right? Like, really showcasing the high stakes of it all. And I think that that's one thing to compliment here, is that the performances are great, the direction is pretty great from Shyamalan. Even the visuals that's happening, like the visuals of seeing the planes falling off, the fact that we're seeing a gray black cloud on the floor, not the floor, but the ceiling, or like the fact that we're seeing it on the clouds. There's some really good technical aspects of this film that really works, and I think that's where this film really does well in terms of just being a, not a really survivalist film, but being an apocalyptic kind of film, right? As well as being a thriller, because that is what, Shyamalan's known for, his thrillers, and that's what this film really does a really strong bit of. In terms of the story itself, I think for the most part, it does well in general, although, again, it gives this opportunity for everyone to think, okay, what is everyone's next move? What's going to happen, especially with the couple? Because, again, they're the ones who have to decide who, whether they're going to save the world, or whether they're going to choose and save it, or whether or not they're not going to choose and just let it burn to the ground, right? And of course, there are some other aspects that are being added into it, like themes about social justice, the LGBTQ representation, how they're feeling, because this is a big part of it. Like, it does go into the discussion of that social commentary that they have to deal with, and how that's becoming a big part of, why there is sort of this contemplation that, maybe this world deserves to burn because of how they treat the LGBTQ community and all that sort of stuff. And that does become a big conversation in terms of this film. Again, I've never read the books, but I will say for one thing that in terms of the plot twist, it is a bit weak. I mean, especially coming from a Shyamalan film where he is known for being, the plot twisty guy who tries to show the surprise of it. I was a bit surprised that this is a film that, even though it is a thriller aspect, it has a dystopian elements to it, there's apocalyptic elements to it, it has a biblical elements to it, as well as the fact that, they go into discussion of social commentary and really leaning into the characters and giving us an idea of who these characters are, whether it be Eric, Andrew, Wen, or even the Four Horsemen when they're narrating their side of the story. Again, the surprising part is that it did lack a plot twist. There's no denying that. I think when I was going to this film, I was expecting something shocking to happen, and yet there really wasn't anything shocking about it. I just felt like it was just a regular film where it has its thriller aspects, as well as like the whole storyline. Oh, this is apocalyptic type of film, but there wasn't anything truly shocking. And of course, if you were to go and do some research, considering that this is a movie based on a book, the book itself has a much darker plot twist, heck, a darker ending that's even more horrific in a way. And I think that this is going to be a huge debate going to this film, that whether or not Shyamalan, he made the right choice, or whether or not, to keep a much more tame ending where, it's not as horrific as, brutal as the book. Or maybe it did need that sort of hint that, that you needed from the books to really demonstrate the commentary that it needed, or the fact that it had more of that signature Shyamalan twist that would have fit with his sort of style. There's always going to be a discussion about that, and I think that this film has become a bit more of a debated film ever since it did get released, because of the change of its ending, whether or not it was okay to do that. Maybe it wasn't, maybe it was. I won't be able to decide that. I'm just going to decide it on based upon how it is as a movie overall. And that is that I am a bit shocked that, the plot twist wasn't the strongest. It was a pretty weak one. And I feel like most of the time this film felt a bit more predictable than most Shyamalan films. And I think that that's kind of where I would deduct points for in terms of a Shyamalan film, thriller film. Because again, this is a film that I expected some really heavy, surprises, twists, endings, and all that sort of stuff, and we didn't really get that. Like, I felt like every time we got deeper and deeper into this film, like, I felt like I was able to predict what was going to happen. Like, we were getting kind of this foreshadow here and there, and it just didn't really divert our expectations of what we thought this film was going to be or how it's going to end. And I think that that's kind of where I feel like the writing itself is a bit more on the weaker side, just because, again, this is a Shyamalan film where I was expecting some things for it to be a thriller film, and yet it became a bit too safe. I feel like this film took a much more safer approach in terms of a Shyamalan film compared to his other films that he has done, and I think that that's kind of where I feel like, okay, I would have wanted more in a sense. But again, that doesn't take away the fact that this film is done in a very technical way, whether it be the direction, the performances, even the visuals, right? Like, as I mentioned before, this movie, in a way that it is being shot, it does have those elements of being a beautiful film that's being shot well done. But it's just a matter of, yes, the most important part is the story. And if the story itself isn't as, shocking and eye-catching as you anticipate for a thriller, I feel like that will kind of be a bit more of a downer of like, okay, well, I went through all this film expecting some things for it to be a thriller, only to see that it just felt too safe. And I'll state that for now. But yeah, I think overall this is a good film for what it was. It really does keep you interested in terms of what's going on. The premise seems very interesting. The fact that it is based on the book, it does give you asking, okay, well, what is it going to do? What is going to replicate? What is going to change? And then also for the fact that, again, the performances are great in this film, especially coming from Dave Bautista and Groff, even from the kid who plays Wen. They all do such an amazing job. I think that that's kind of the big points of what this film does well. And I feel like even though it isn't the most exciting, it isn't the darkest film that I've seen from Shyamalan, I think overall it's a very decent addition from Shyamalan. I feel like, at least with this film, yes, it is a safer film for Shyamalan, but in a way it still does things technically that does do things well. And I think overall, like, even though it does have a very weak ending, I think overall it is a very good 1 to 2 times sort of watch for anybody who plans on watching, of course. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Knock at the Cabin. If I were to give kind of this rating, I'll probably give it like a pretty solid 3. It's not the most shocking, it's not the best thriller I've seen, but I think that given some of the more technical stuff, I feel like that really makes up for how good this film could have been had it not been for the writing. But it still is a very decent film because of all the other elements that really allow this film to be at least interesting and keeping our attention into what's going on in Knock at the Cabin. So yeah, that's all I have to say about it. Have you seen Knock at the Cabin? Did you enjoy? Did you not enjoy it? Have you read the book? What do you think about the ending? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Do you think it was better or worse than what the ending was from the books? Because I know that's a huge debate going on the internet. What are your thoughts overall with the film? What do you think about the performances, the technical aspects, and anything else that you have to say about this film? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe.